Giovanni Ferrara hadn't touched a woman with gentleness in years, not since violence became his primary language. But when his assistant Jade Morrison stumbled out of his private wine cellar with her blouse torn and terror in her green eyes, something ancient and protective roared to life in his chest. The investor who'd followed her down there, Preston Wade, was still adjusting his belt when Giovanni's fist connected with his jaw. Some men learned about consequences through words. Others learned through broken bones and the cold realization that they'd touched something that belonged to a monster far worse than themselves. Where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. And if you want exclusive access to bonus content and early releases, click that join button to become a member. Jade Morrison had been Giovanni Ferrara's executive assistant for exactly 6 months, when she realized her boss was definitely not just a successful import-export businessman. The signs had been there from the beginning, subtle but present. The way men twice his age deferred to him with an edge of fear beneath their respect. The phone calls he took in Italian, his voice dropping to a tone that made her spine straighten instinctively, even though she couldn't understand the words. The meetings that happened after hours in his private office, where she was never asked to take notes or even acknowledge, had occurred. But Jade needed this job. At 27, with student loans from her business degree and rent in downtown Chicago that consumed half her paycheck, she couldn't afford to ask questions. Giovanni paid well, better than any executive assistant position she'd seen, and he treated her with a cold professionalism that never crossed lines. He was demanding but fair, expected excellence, but provided the resources to achieve it, and never once made her feel unsafe. Even if he did make her feel other things. Giovanni Ferrara was 40 years old and looked like he'd been carved from marble by an artist with a preference for dark, dangerous beauty. He stood at 6'3", with broad shoulders that filled out his expensive suits in a way that made Jade's mouth go dry when he walked past her desk. His hair was dark brown, almost black, kept short, and always perfectly styled. But it was his eyes that really got her, a striking amber color that seemed to see through every professional mask she wore. They were wolf's eyes, predator's eyes, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. His hands were scarred across the knuckles, she'd noticed, not office hands, fighter's hands. She'd been working late on a Thursday evening in October, finishing quarterly reports, when she'd accidentally overheard a conversation that confirmed what she'd been trying not to think about for 6 months. "The Moretti family is pushing into our territory on the south side," a man's voice had said from Giovanni's office. Carlo, she thought, one of his security consultants. "Let them push," Giovanni had replied, his voice carrying that edge of cold amusement that made Jade's stomach flip. "They'll find out what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. Make sure our friends in the distribution network understand we're not conceding anything. If Moretti wants a war, we'll give him one, but it'll be on our terms." Jade had stopped typing, her fingers frozen over her keyboard. Distribution network, territory, war. Her boss was Mafia. She should quit, should run. Should definitely not sit at her desk the next morning like everything was normal, handing Giovanni his espresso exactly how he liked it, while pretending she hadn't heard him casually discussing territorial disputes, like he was discussing shipping manifests. But she didn't quit. Partly because she needed the money. Mostly because when Giovanni took the coffee from her hand, his fingers had brushed hers for half a second, and she'd felt that touch everywhere. "Thank you, Jade," he'd said, his amber eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You stayed late last night. I appreciate your dedication." "Of course, Mr. Ferrara," she'd managed, proud her voice didn't shake. Something had flickered in his expression, too quick to name. "Giovanni," he'd corrected softly. "When it's just us, you can call me Giovanni." She'd nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and escaped back to her desk with her heart pounding. That had been 3 weeks ago. Since then, something had shifted between them. Nothing inappropriate, nothing she could point to as proof, but the air felt different when they were alone. He'd started asking her to stay for evening meetings, not to take notes but to observe and learn the business. She'd sit in the corner of his office while he met with men who looked like they belonged in Mafia movies, and she'd watch Giovanni command the room with a quiet authority that was absolutely magnetic. He was teaching her, she realized, showing her his world, bit by bit, giving her the choice to stay or leave with full knowledge of what she was choosing. She chose to stay. On the Friday evening that changed everything, Jade wore a cream silk blouse and black pencil skirt, her honey blonde hair pulled back in a neat bun. At 5'7", she was tall enough to meet Giovanni's eyes without straining when she wore heels, though she still had to tilt her head back slightly. Her green eyes, which her mother always said were her best feature, were focused on her computer screen as she finalized the schedule for Giovanni's trip to New York next week. It was nearly 8 p.m. The office was empty except for her, Giovanni, and the 2 security men who were always somewhere nearby. Carlo and Vincent, built like brick walls and utterly loyal to their boss. The intercom on her desk buzzed. "Jade, can you come in, please?" Giovanni's voice, smooth and dark as expensive whiskey. She grabbed her tablet and entered his office. It was all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Giovanni sat behind his massive desk, but he wasn't alone. A man she didn't recognize occupied one of the chairs across from him. Expensive suit slightly rumpled, tie loosened. "Jade, this is Preston Wade," Giovanni said, his tone carefully neutral in a way that immediately put her on alert. "He's an investor from New York. Preston, my assistant, Jade Morrison." Preston Wade looked her over in a way that made her skin crawl. He was maybe 45, once handsome, but going soft around the middle, with the particular arrogance of men who'd never been told no. "Pleasure," he said, his eyes lingering on her chest. Jade's expression remained professionally pleasant, though disgust curled in her stomach. "Mr. Wade." "We'll be wrapping up shortly," Giovanni said, and there was something protective in his tone that made warmth bloom in her chest. "You can head home once you've sent those contracts to—" "Actually," Preston interrupted, waving his glass, "I could use another drink. This is good stuff, Ferrara. What is it, 30-year Macallan?" 25, Giovanni corrected, ice in his voice at the interruption. "Even better." Preston drained his glass. "Where do you keep it? I'll grab the bottle. Make this easier." "That won't be necessary." "Come on, don't make me beg. I know you Italian boys like to keep the good stuff locked up." Preston laughed, the sound grating. "What, you got a wine cellar or something?" Giovanni's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping. Jade recognized that particular tension. He was annoyed, but maintaining control for business reasons. Whatever deal they were discussing, it was important enough that Giovanni was tolerating this asshole's behavior. "Jade," Giovanni said quietly, his amber eyes finding hers with an intensity that made her spine straighten. "There's a reserve cellar downstairs, through the kitchen and down the hall. The Macallan 25 is on the 3rd shelf, left side. Could you retrieve it?" She should have questioned why he was sending her instead of calling Carlo. Should have noticed the way Giovanni's hands had tightened on his desk, or the calculating look in Preston's eyes. Should have recognized the setup. But she just nodded. "Of course." She left the office, took the elevator down to the floor that housed the executive kitchen and conference rooms. The building was quiet at this hour. Most businesses closed. Her heels clicked on the marble floor as she made her way through the kitchen to the hallway Giovanni had described. At the end was a heavy wooden door she'd never noticed before, slightly ajar. The reserve cellar was more of a small room, lined with climate-controlled shelves holding bottles that probably cost more than her car. Soft lighting illuminated labels in Italian, French, Spanish. She scanned the 3rd shelf on the left, looking for the Macallan. Behind her, the door clicked shut. Jade spun around, heart jumping into her throat. Preston Wade stood between her and the exit, one hand on the door handle, the other loosening his tie further. "Mr. Wade," she said, forcing her voice to stay level even as alarm bells screamed in her head. I was just getting the whiskey. I know. He stepped closer. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Thought I'd help you carry it. That bottle's expensive. Wouldn't want you to drop it. I can manage, Jade said, angling toward the door. He shifted, blocking her path. Her pulse began to race. Giovanni is waiting. Ferrara can wait. Preston's eyes traveled down her body with obvious intent. You know what your problem is, sweetheart? You think you're so much better than everyone else. Walking around here in your tight little skirts, looking down your nose at men like me. I don't know what you're talking about. Jade's hand moved slowly toward her pocket, where her phone was. I'm just doing my job. Your job. Preston laughed, bitter and ugly. Is that what we're calling it? Everyone knows what Ferrara really is, and everyone knows what you are to him. His assistant, his whore. Preston spat and lunged. Jade tried to dodge, but there wasn't room. His hand caught her arm, yanking her forward hard enough to make her stumble. She opened her mouth to scream, but his other hand clamped over it, fingers digging into her cheeks painfully. Shut up, he hissed, alcohol-sour breath hot against her face. You think you're special? Think Ferrara gives a shit about you? You're nothing. Just another piece of ass in a nice blouse. He grabbed the front of her silk shirt and pulled. Hard. The fabric tore with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the small space. Buttons scattered across the floor. Jade's scream was muffled against his palm as he shoved her back against the wine shelves, bottles rattling. Let's see what he sees in you, Preston snarled, his free hand reaching for her bra. Terror and rage exploded through Jade in equal measure. She bit down on his palm as hard as she could. Preston jerked back with a curse, and in that split second of freedom, Jade did scream. Giovanni! The sound was raw, desperate, echoing off the cellar walls. Preston's fist connected with her cheekbone, snapping her head to the side. Pain burst across her face, bright and sharp. She tasted blood. You bitch! The door exploded inward. 1 second it was closed. The next, it was hanging off its hinges, and Giovanni Ferrara stood in the doorway like an avenging angel carved from violence and fury. He took in the scene in an instant. Jade, blouse torn open, blood on her lip, pressed against the wine shelves. Preston, hand raised for another blow, turning toward the door with his face going pale. Giovanni moved. Jade had never seen anyone move that fast. One moment he was in the doorway. The next, his hand was wrapped around Preston's throat, slamming him into the wall hard enough to crack the drywall. The sound Preston made was somewhere between a wheeze and a whimper. Don't, Giovanni said softly, and his voice was the most terrifying thing Jade had ever heard. Quiet, almost gentle, absolutely murderous. Don't say a word. Don't apologize. Don't beg. You touched her. You put your hands on what's mine. Words won't save you. He pulled Preston forward and slammed him back again. Blood sprayed from Preston's nose. But before I kill you, you're going to answer one question. Who sent you? Nobody, Preston gasped, hands clawing uselessly at Giovanni's wrist. The Mafia boss's grip didn't budge. I swear, it was just me. I just wanted... Giovanni's knee came up into Preston's stomach. The investor doubled over with a choked gasp, and Giovanni let him drop to his knees. Wrong answer. Giovanni's eyes found Jade's, and something in his expression softened for just a second. Close your eyes, Bella. Don't watch this part. But Jade couldn't look away, couldn't move. She watched as Giovanni methodically, efficiently, broke Preston Wade into pieces. No anger in his movements now, just cold, calculated violence. A punch to the jaw, ribs, nose, each blow delivered with surgical precision. You come into my city, Giovanni said conversationally, each word punctuated with another hit. Into my building, And you put your hands on my assistant. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? Preston tried to crawl toward the door. Giovanni stepped on his hand. The crack of breaking bones made Jade flinch. "I'm sorry," Preston sobbed. I'm sorry, please." "Too late for sorry." Giovanni crouched down, grabbing Preston's hair and forcing him to look up. "You touched her. You tore her clothes. You made her scream in fear. For that, you don't get to walk out of here. You don't get to go home. You don't get anything except what you deserve." He stood, pulled a phone from his pocket, and made a call without taking his eyes off Preston's broken form. "Carlo, cellar, cleanup needed. Make it disappear. Completely." "No," Preston whimpered. "No, please. I have a wife, kids." "Should have thought of that before you touched her," Giovanni said flatly. He finally turned away from Preston, and his entire demeanor changed as he approached Jade. The cold violence melted into careful concern. "Jade, Bella, look at me." She was shaking, she realized. Her hands trembled as she tried to hold the torn edges of her blouse together. Giovanni shrugged out of his suit jacket and draped it around her shoulders with infinite gentleness, wrapping her in fabric that smelled like his cologne, bergamot and cedar, and something darker. Something inherently him. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his hands hovering near her face like he wanted to touch, but was afraid of scaring her more. "I'm so sorry. I knew he was a piece of shit, but I thought I could control the situation. I should have sent Carlo with you. I should have—" "You saved me," Jade interrupted, her voice shaking. "He was going to—" She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't name what Preston had intended. "I know." Giovanni's jaw clenched, rage flickering in his amber eyes again before he controlled it. "He won't hurt anyone ever again. I promise you that." Behind them, Carlo appeared in the doorway, followed by Vincent. They took in the scene without reaction, their expressions professionally blank. "Boss," Carlo said simply. "Take care of it," Giovanni ordered. "Now. And check the security footage. I want to know if anyone else knew about this." "On it." Carlo and Vincent moved past them to where Preston was still curled on the floor, whimpering. They hauled him up without gentleness. As they dragged him toward the door, Preston's eyes met Jade's one last time, desperate and pleading. She felt nothing. No pity. No mercy. Just cold satisfaction that Giovanni Ferrara was exactly what she'd suspected him to be, and that for once in her life, being protected by a monster felt like the safest place in the world. "Come," Giovanni said gently, guiding her toward the door with a hand on her lower back, careful not to touch skin. "Not here. Upstairs." He led her to the elevator, shielding her body with his as they rode up to his office floor. She was vaguely aware of his security team clearing the hallway so no one would see her. Aware of the soft Italian he was murmuring under his breath, words she couldn't understand but that somehow soothed the shaking in her hands. In his office, Giovanni guided her to the leather couch and disappeared into the attached bathroom. He returned with a first aid kit and a damp towel, kneeling in front of her with careful movements. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her face where Preston had hit her. Jade nodded. She couldn't seem to find words. Giovanni cleaned the blood from her split lip with gentle dabs of the towel, his amber eyes focused with fierce concentration on not hurting her. Up close, she could see the faint scars on his face that makeup or lighting usually hid. A thin line through his eyebrow, another along his jaw. Evidence of a life lived in violence, yet his hands on her face were impossibly tender. "There's going to be bruising," he said quietly. "Your cheekbone and around your mouth. Ice will help with the swelling." His hands trembled slightly as he applied a butterfly bandage to her split lip. "I should have protected you better." You did protect me, Jade said, finding her voice. You came. Not soon enough. His eyes met hers, and she saw guilt there, and rage, and something else. Something that made her breath catch. When I heard you scream my name. He stopped, jaw clenching. I've killed men for less than what he did to you. I'll kill anyone who tries to hurt you. It should have scared her. This confession, this promise of violence delivered in his quiet, certain voice. Instead, warmth spread through her chest. I know who you are, Jade said. What you are. I've known for a while. Giovanni went still. And you stayed. I stayed. Why? She looked at him, this beautiful, dangerous man kneeling at her feet, and told him the truth. Because you've never made me feel afraid. Until tonight, I've never seen you be anything but professional with me. You could have hit on me, pressured me, used your position against me 100 times. But you never did. You treated me with respect. Even knowing what you are, I trust you more than I've trusted any man. Something shifted in Giovanni's expression. Walls coming down, masks falling away. You shouldn't trust me, he said roughly. I'm not a good man, Jade. I've done things that would make you sick. I've killed, stolen, destroyed lives. I'm going to hell, and I've made peace with that. Maybe, Jade said, but you're good to me. That's what matters. The air between them felt electric, charged with everything unspoken. Giovanni's hand still framed her face, and she became acutely aware of how close he was, how his amber eyes had darkened to almost gold, how his gaze kept dropping to her lips despite the blood and the bandage. I need to tell you something, Giovanni said, his voice dropping lower. And if it makes you uncomfortable, you can walk away right now, and I'll make sure you're safe and set up somewhere far from here. But I need to say it. Okay, Jade whispered. I've been attracted to you since the day you walked into your interview wearing that green dress that matched your eyes, he said. You sat across from me and didn't flinch when I tried to intimidate you, didn't giggle or flirt or play games. You looked me in the eye and told me exactly why you were the best person for the job. And I hired you on the spot, not because you were the most qualified, but because I wanted you close. Wanted to see you every day. Wanted an excuse to have you in my life that didn't involve admitting I was already half in love with a woman I'd known for 20 minutes. Jade's heart stopped, started again, faster. Giovanni, I've kept my distance, he continued, his thumb stroking her cheekbones so lightly she might have imagined it. Treated you professionally because you deserved that respect. Because crossing that line would have been an abuse of power. But tonight, when I heard you scream, when I saw what he did to you, his jaw clenched. I can't pretend anymore. Can't keep my distance. You're mine, Jade. You've been mine since the moment you walked through my door. And if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, I'm asking you to stay. Not as my assistant. As something more. Something real. She should say no. Should run from this man who'd just brutally beaten someone, who'd ordered a body to disappear, who was confessing to feelings that were probably not healthy or sane. Instead, Jade leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft, careful of her split lip, but Giovanni made a sound low in his throat and deepened it anyway, his hand sliding into her hair as he angled her head. He tasted like mint and something darker, and when his tongue traced her lower lip, she opened for him with a gasp. The kiss turned desperate. 6 months of tension, of stolen glances and careful distance, burning away in the heat between them. Giovanni pulled her closer, and Jade's hands found his chest, feeling his heart racing as fast as hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Giovanni rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight, he said. Not like that. Just, I need to know you're safe. Need to see you're okay. Okay, Jade agreed. because the thought of going back to her empty apartment, of being alone with her thoughts about what had almost happened, made her chest tighten with panic. "Okay," Giovanni echoed. He stood, pulling her up with him, and for the first time since the attack, Jade felt steady, safe, protected in a way that had nothing to do with locked doors and everything to do with the man holding her hand like she was something precious. Giovanni's penthouse was exactly what Jade expected. All dark leather, exposed brick, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Expensive, but not ostentatious. Comfortable in a masculine way that suited him perfectly. What she didn't expect was how gentle he'd be. He'd driven them himself, no driver, speaking quietly about nothing important while keeping one hand on her knee the entire ride. In his home, he'd led her to the guest room and provided her with one of his shirts to sleep in, soft cotton that swallowed her frame and smelled like him. "Bathroom is through there," he'd said, pointing. "Anything you need, take it. I'm right across the hall if you need me. For anything, even just company." Jade had showered, washing away the smell of Preston's cologne and the feeling of his hands on her skin. She'd stared at herself in the mirror, at the bruising already blooming purple across her cheekbone, the split in her lower lip. Evidence of violence, evidence of survival, evidence that Giovanni Ferrara had killed for her. She should be horrified. Instead, she felt claimed. Sleep didn't come. Around 2 a.m., Jade gave up and padded out of the guest room. The penthouse was dark, except for soft lighting from the kitchen. She found Giovanni there, standing at the counter in black lounge pants and a white t-shirt that stretched across his broad shoulders, staring into a glass of whiskey he hadn't drunk. "Can't sleep?" he asked without turning around. "Keep seeing his face," Jade admitted. "And then I see yours, and I don't know which one scares me more." Giovanni turned then, amber eyes finding hers in the dim light. "I scare you?" "You killed him." It wasn't a question. "Yes." Without hesitation. "Yes. And you'd do it again." In a heartbeat. Giovanni set down his glass and moved toward her slowly, giving her time to back away if she wanted. She didn't. "Jade, you need to understand something about my world. There are rules, codes. You don't touch what belongs to another man in my position. It's not just disrespect, it's a declaration of war." Preston knew that. He came here specifically to test me, to see if I'd protect you, to see what you mean to me. And now he knows. Now everyone who matters knows. "What do I mean to you?" Jade asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "Everything," Giovanni said simply. "You mean everything." The air between them felt thick with possibility. Jade stepped closer, closing the distance, and placed her hand on Giovanni's chest. His heart thundered under her palm. "I should be afraid of you," she said. "You should," he agreed. "I'm not." "I know. That's what scares me." Jade looked up at him. This beautiful, dangerous man who'd confessed to loving her, who'd killed for her, who was looking at her now like she held his entire world in her hands. "Take me to bed," she said. Giovanni's eyes darkened. "Jade." "Not to sleep, not to talk." She reached up, cupping his scarred jaw. "Take me to bed and show me I'm alive. Show me I'm safe. Show me I'm yours." For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Thought he'd be the gentleman and send her back to the guest room with some noble speech about her being vulnerable, about waiting, about doing things right. Instead, Giovanni swept her up into his arms and carried her to his bedroom. What happened there was desperate and tender in equal measure. Giovanni undressing her like unwrapping something sacred, his hands reverent on her skin, his mouth following the path of his fingers, learning every curve, every sensitive spot. When he finally pushed inside her, Jade gasped at the stretch, at the fullness, at the way he filled spaces she hadn't known were empty. They moved together in the darkness, and it felt like claiming, like healing, like two damaged people finding something whole in each other. After, lying tangled in his sheets with his arm around her waist and his face buried in her hair, Giovanni spoke into the quiet. "I meant what I said earlier. You're mine now. That means you're under my protection. No one touches you, no one threatens you, no one looks at you wrong without answering to me." "Possessive," Jade murmured, but there was no heat in it. "Yes." He pressed a kiss to her bare shoulder. "I am. In my world, that's what love looks like. Territorial, protective, absolute. If that's too much for you—" "It's not," Jade interrupted. She turned in his arms to face him, studying his face in the moonlight streaming through the windows. "I've spent my whole life being invisible, being overlooked, being the girl who was smart but not beautiful, capable but not special. You make me feel seen. You make me feel important. You make me feel—" "Loved," Giovanni finished. "Because you are. Christ, Jade, you're so loved it terrifies me." She kissed him then, soft and slow, tasting the promise on his lips. "Stay," he said against her mouth. "Move in here. Let me take care of you." "That's fast," Jade said, but her heart was already saying yes. "I'm 40 years old and I've never felt like this," Giovanni said. "I'm not wasting time. Stay. Be with me. Let me love you the way you deserve." "Okay," Jade whispered. "Yes." Giovanni pulled her closer, and Jade fell asleep feeling safer than she ever had, wrapped in the arms of the most dangerous man in Chicago. The next 3 months were a crash course in Giovanni Ferrara's real world. Jade learned that Adriatic Trade Corporation was legitimate, actually. The import-export business was successful and clean. But it was also a front for Giovanni's real empire. Smuggling, gambling, protection rackets across the South Side. He controlled territory the way a CEO controlled market share, with strategy and ruthlessness in equal measure. She learned that made man meant officially inducted into the family structure, that capo was captain in the hierarchy, that civilians meant people outside the criminal world. Giovanni explained everything with patient detail, never making her feel stupid for asking questions. She learned that his family, the Ferraras, had been in Chicago for 3 generations. His grandfather had come from Sicily in the 50s, built the empire from nothing. His father had expanded it, made it sophisticated. Giovanni had taken over 10 years ago when his father died, and under his leadership, the Ferrara family had become the most powerful organization in the city. She learned all of this while also learning intimate details like how he took his coffee, espresso, no sugar, how he slept, on his back with one arm thrown over his head, how he made love, intense, focused, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Moving into the penthouse had been easy. Most of her stuff fit in 3 boxes anyway. Giovanni had cleared out half his massive closet for her clothes, renovated one of his spare rooms into a home office for her, and somehow managed to keep his distance during work hours, even though they were sleeping in the same bed every night. At Adriatic Trade Corporation, she was still his assistant. Professional, efficient, maintaining appropriate boundaries. After 5 p.m., she was his woman, and everyone in his world knew it. "You're sure about this?" Her best friend Maya had asked over drinks one evening, 2 months into Jade's new life. "You're dating a literal mafia boss, Jade. This is insane." "I know," Jade had said, and couldn't quite hide her smile. "It's the best decision I've ever made." Because it was. Giovanni was attentive without being smothering, protective without being controlling. He included her in his world, but never forced her participation in the darker aspects. When he had business that involved violence, he made sure she was elsewhere, kept her hands clean while keeping her informed. And the romance. God, the romance. Their first official date had been 2 weeks after that terrible night. Giovanni had taken her to a private restaurant in Little Italy. the kind of place that didn't advertise and required connections to even find. They'd sat in a secluded corner booth while he'd fed her homemade pasta and told her stories about growing up in Chicago, about his mother who'd died when he was young, about learning the family business from his father. "I never wanted this life," he'd admitted, twirling pasta on his fork. "Wanted to be a chef, actually. Loved cooking. But when you're born into this family, you don't get choices. You get responsibilities." "You could have walked away," Jade had said. "Could have," Giovanni agreed. "But walking away would have meant leaving my father vulnerable, leaving my people without protection, and I couldn't do that. So I became what I needed to be." His amber eyes had found hers. "But with you, I get to be Giovanni, not the boss, not the enforcer, just me." That vulnerability, that glimpse of the man beneath the monster, had made Jade fall even harder. Their second date had been at his family's lake house in Wisconsin, a weekend getaway where he'd cooked for her himself, proving he really did have chef-level skills. They'd made love on the dock at sunset, with water lapping beneath them and the sky turning pink and gold, and Jade had thought this is what happiness feels like. There were complications, of course. Giovanni's enemies became her enemies by association. She had security now, Carlo or Vincent always nearby when Giovanni couldn't be. She couldn't go anywhere without someone watching her back, and while it should have felt suffocating, it mostly just felt safe. The Moretti family, the rivals Giovanni had mentioned in that overheard conversation, had tried to use her as leverage once. They'd approached her outside her favorite coffee shop, 3 men in suits trying to look casual, while very obviously threatening her. "Mr. Ferrara would be very sad if something happened to his pretty assistant," one had said, fake smile not reaching his eyes. "Tell him the South Side isn't his to keep. Tell him to back off, or we'll have to hurt someone he cares about." Jade had smiled back, cold and certain. "Tell Mr. Moretti that if he ever approaches me again, Giovanni won't just hurt him, he'll erase him, completely. I'm not a message service, and I'm not someone you use as a bargaining chip. Try this again, and the last thing you'll see is my boyfriend's face right before he ends you." The men had actually backed off, surprised by her venom. Carlo, watching from across the street, had later told Giovanni about the exchange. Giovanni had been furious at the approach, but proud of her response. "You're a Ferrara woman now," he'd said that night, pulling her into his lap in his office. "That means you don't scare, you don't bend, you stand your ground." "A Ferrara woman," Jade had repeated, testing the title. "Does that come with a ring?" Giovanni had gone still. "Do you want it to?" Too soon, probably. They'd only been together 3 months, but nothing about their relationship had been conventional from the start. "Eventually," Jade had said carefully. "Not today, but eventually. Yes." Giovanni's smile had been devastating. "Eventually, then. I'll make sure it's a ring worthy of you." Now, 3 months in, Jade was preparing for their biggest test yet, meeting Giovanni's family, not the criminal organization, his actual family. His Aunt Rosaria, his cousin Lucia, his grandmother Nonna Giulia, who was apparently terrifying despite being 85 and barely 5 feet tall. "She's going to interrogate you," Giovanni warned as they drove to his aunt's house in the suburbs on a Sunday afternoon. "Ask invasive questions about your intentions, your background, whether you're using me for money. Don't let her intimidate you." "Your grandmother is going to intimidate me about using you for money?" Jade laughed. "I'm an executive assistant dating a multi-millionaire crime boss. Everyone assumes I'm a gold digger." "You're not." Giovanni's hand found hers, lacing their fingers together. "You loved me when you thought I was just a businessman. You stay with me despite knowing what I really am. That's not gold digging. That's loyalty. That's love." "Still," Jade said nervously, smoothing down her cream sweater dress. "What if they hate me?" "They won't." Giovanni lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. Because I love you, and that's all that matters. Nonna Giulia's house was warm and loud, and smelled like tomato sauce and fresh bread. Giovanni's Aunt Rosaria greeted them at the door, a beautiful woman in her 50s, who immediately pulled Jade into a hug like they were already family. Finally, Rosaria said, beaming. Giovanni brings home a woman who isn't afraid of him. Come, come. Nonna is waiting. The matriarch of the Ferrara family sat in an armchair in the living room like a tiny queen on a throne. She wore all black, her silver hair pulled back in a perfect bun, her dark eyes sharp and assessing as she studied Jade. So, Nonna Giulia said in heavily accented English, you are the girl who stole my Giovanni's heart. I didn't steal it, Jade said, meeting the old woman's gaze steadily. He gave it to me. Something flickered in Nonna's expression. Approval, maybe. Sit. Tell me about yourself. Where are you from? What is your family? Jade sat in the chair Giovanni pulled out for her, very aware of him standing behind her, a protective presence. I'm from Indiana originally. My family is complicated. My father left when I was young. My mother remarried, but we're not close. I put myself through college, worked my way up in business administration, and 6 months ago, I became Mr. Ferrara's assistant. And his lover. Nonna added bluntly. Yes, Jade said, refusing to be ashamed. And his lover. You know what he is? What this family is? Yes. And still you stay. I stay because of what he is, not despite it, Jade said. I love him. All of him. The parts that are gentle and the parts that are dangerous. I'm not afraid of Giovanni, and I'm not afraid of his world. I'm just grateful to be part of it. Nonna Giulia studied her for a long moment, then smiled. A real smile, warm and genuine. Good. You have spine. My Giovanni needs woman with spine. She switched to rapid Italian, speaking to Giovanni, and whatever she said made him smile and relax. She approves, he murmured in Jade's ear. Which means you're officially family now. Dinner was chaos in the best way. Giovanni's cousin Lucia, a lawyer who worked on the legitimate side of family business, grilled Jade about her education and career plans. Aunt Rosaria told embarrassing stories about Giovanni as a child. Nonna Giulia fed everyone like she was personally offended if anyone's plate was empty for more than 30 seconds. And through it all, Giovanni kept his hand on Jade's knee under the table, a constant reminder that she belonged here, with him, in this strange, wonderful, dangerous family. After dinner, Giovanni found Jade on the back porch, looking out at the garden lit by string lights. You survived, he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. I think I did more than survive, Jade said, leaning back against his chest. I think they like me. Of course they like you. You're perfect. Giovanni pressed a kiss to her temple. Nonna said you're exactly what I need. Strong, smart, not afraid. She also said I better marry you soon before some other man figures out what he's missing. Jade's heart skipped. Is that so? That's so. Giovanni turned her in his arms, his amber eyes intense in the soft light. I told her I'm working on it, that I'm waiting for the right moment. How will you know it's the right moment? Jade asked, though her pulse was racing. I'll know, Giovanni said, and kissed her softly. Trust me. 6 months after that terrible night in the wine cellar, Giovanni asked Jade to marry him. It was January, and Chicago was buried under snow, the city transformed into a winter wonderland. Giovanni had told Jade they were going to dinner at their restaurant, the place in Little Italy where they'd had their first date. But when the car stopped, it wasn't at a restaurant. It was at the Art Institute of Chicago, closed for the evening, but somehow lit up inside. Giovanni, Jade said, confused. What? Come with me, he said, helping her out of the car. He'd rented out the entire museum, just for them. They walked through empty galleries hand in hand, their footsteps echoing on marble floors, surrounded by priceless art and perfect silence. In the gallery of Renaissance paintings, Giovanni stopped in front of a piece depicting a knight and a lady, the knight kneeling while the lady touched his face with obvious tenderness. "My father brought me here once," Giovanni said quietly, staring at the painting. "I was maybe 8 years old. He pointed to this painting and told me that's what real love looks like. Not conquering, not possessing, kneeling. Offering yourself completely and trusting someone not to destroy you with that power." He turned to face Jade, and she saw it then. The vulnerability in his eyes, the fear mixed with hope. "I've spent my whole life being the one people kneel to," Giovanni continued. "The one people fear, the one with all the power. And then you walked into my life and turned everything upside down. You saw the worst parts of me and didn't run. You stood beside me when you could have walked away. You loved me when you had every reason not to." He lowered himself to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. Jade's breath caught. "I'm a criminal, Jade. A killer. I've done terrible things and will probably do more before I die. I can't promise you a normal life, a safe life, or even a long life. But I can promise you this. I will love you with everything I am until the day I stop breathing. I will protect you with my last breath. I will spend every morning for the rest of our lives making sure you know you're the best decision I ever made." He opened the box. Inside was a ring that made Jade gasp. A sapphire, deep blue and perfect, surrounded by diamonds. "I didn't choose a diamond," Giovanni explained, "because you're not like other women. You're rare. You're extraordinary. You're—" His voice caught. "You're everything. So, Jade Morrison, will you marry me? Will you be my wife? Will you let me spend the rest of my life kneeling at your feet and thanking God you chose me?" Tears were streaming down Jade's face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course, yes. I love you. I love you so much." Giovanni slipped the ring on her finger, and then he was standing, pulling her into his arms, kissing her with desperate relief and joy and promise. "You're sure?" he murmured against her lips. "Because once you're mine officially, I'm never letting you go. Never." "I'm sure," Jade said. "I've been sure since that night when you broke down a door for me. I'm yours, Giovanni. I've always been yours." They were married 2 months later in a private ceremony at his family's lake house, with snow falling outside and Nonna Giulia crying happy tears in the front row. Jade wore a simple white dress, Giovanni wore a black suit, and when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Giovanni kissed her like he was trying to pour all his love into that single moment. "Mrs. Ferrara," he whispered against her lips. "Mr. Ferrara," she whispered back. The reception was small, intimate, just family and Giovanni's closest men. Carlo gave a toast about how he'd never seen the boss smile before Jade came along. Vincent admitted he'd bet money they'd be married within a year, and he'd won. Nonna Giulia pulled Jade aside and told her she was the best thing to happen to the family in generations. And later that night, in their room at the lake house with moonlight streaming through the windows and the sound of waves against the dock, Giovanni made love to his wife with a reverence that made her cry. "I never thought I'd have this," he said afterward, holding her close. "Never thought I deserved it. You, this life, this happiness. You gave me something I didn't know I was missing." "You gave me the same," Jade said, tracing the scars on his chest with gentle fingers. "Gave me safety, love, a family, purpose. You make me feel seen in a way no one else ever has." "Always," Giovanni promised. "For the rest of our lives, Bella. I'm yours and you're mine, and nothing will ever change that." 1 year after their wedding, Jade Ferrara sat in Giovanni's office at Adriatic Trade Corporation, working on quarterly reports while her husband negotiated a shipping contract in the conference room. She still worked as his assistant, though now it was more of a partnership than an employment relationship. She knew every aspect of his business, both legitimate and otherwise. She attended meetings, offered input, and had earned the respect of every man in Giovanni's organization through her sharp mind and absolute fearlessness. She was also 4 months pregnant. Giovanni didn't know yet. She'd only confirmed it that morning, 3 positive tests sitting in her purse as evidence. She was waiting for the right moment to tell him, wanting it to be perfect. The office door opened, and Giovanni walked in, loosening his tie with a satisfied expression. Contract signed. The shipping routes are ours. Good, Jade said, saving her document. Giovanni rounded the desk and pulled her up from her chair, settling into it himself, and then pulling her into his lap. This had become their routine. After business hours, when it was just them, he kept her close, always touching, always connected. "How was your day, Mrs. Ferrara?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her neck. "Productive," Jade said, playing with his collar. "Giovanni, I need to tell you something." His arms tightened around her waist. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. It's just important." She turned in his lap to face him, studying his handsome face, his amber eyes, the jaw she loved to kiss. "We're going to have a baby." Giovanni went absolutely still. "What?" "I'm pregnant. 4 months. I confirmed it this morning, but I've suspected for a while." Jade watched his face carefully, trying to read his reaction. "I know we haven't talked about kids much, and if you're not ready—" "Not ready?" Giovanni's voice came out choked. His hands came up to frame her face, and she saw tears in his eyes. "Bella, you're giving me a child, a family, something good and pure from this life we've built. How could I not be ready for that?" He kissed her deeply, and when he pulled back, he was smiling wider than she'd ever seen. "A baby," he repeated, sounding awed. "Our baby." "Our baby," Jade confirmed. Giovanni's hands moved to her stomach, still flat but soon to change. "I'm going to be a father." "A good father," Jade said. "I know you will be." "I'm going to protect you both," Giovanni said fiercely. "No one will touch you. No one will threaten our child. I'll burn this whole city down before I let anything happen to either of you." "I know," Jade said, because she did. Giovanni's love was absolute, possessive, dangerous to anyone who threatened what was his, and she wouldn't have it any other way. That night, at home in their penthouse, Giovanni made love to her with infinite gentleness, his hands worshipping her body like it was something sacred. Afterward, he held her close, one hand protective on her stomach. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too," Jade said. "Thank you for saving me that night, for protecting me, for loving me. Always, Bella, always." 7 months later, Jade gave birth to a daughter with her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair. They named her Giulia Rosaria Ferrara, after Giovanni's grandmother and aunt. Giovanni held his daughter in his arms and wept. This man who'd killed without remorse, who ruled Chicago's underworld with iron control, who was feared by everyone who knew his name, was reduced to tears by a 7-pound baby girl. "She's perfect," he whispered, carefully adjusting the pink blanket. "She's so perfect." "She is," Jade agreed from the hospital bed, exhausted but happy. "I'm never letting anything happen to her," Giovanni vowed. "Or to you. You're my whole world. Both of you. Everything I do, everything I am, it's for you." And he meant it. The business continued. The territory expanded. But Giovanni was different now. More careful. More strategic. More focused on building something that would last. Something his daughter could be proud of even if she never understood the full extent of what her father did. Little Giulia grew up loved and protected, with a father who taught her Italian and how to throw a punch, and a mother who taught her to be strong and compassionate. She grew up surrounded by uncles like Carlo and Vincent who would die for her, and a nonna who spoiled her rotten. And on quiet evenings, Giovanni and Jade would sit on their balcony overlooking Lake Michigan, watching the sunset while their daughter played nearby, and they would remember that terrible night that brought them together. "Best decision I ever made," Giovanni would say, pulling Jade close. "What decision?" she'd ask, though she knew the answer. "Asking who touched you," he'd reply. "Breaking down that door, choosing you, loving you." "Best decision I ever made was staying," Jade would say, "loving you back, building this life with you." And it was true. From violence and terror, they'd built something beautiful, something lasting, something worth protecting with everything they had. Because love, real love, wasn't always gentle. Sometimes it was fierce, possessive, dangerous to anyone who threatened it. Sometimes love wore a suit and answered violence with violence. Sometimes love broke down doors. And sometimes love looked like a mafia boss, kneeling before the woman who owned his heart, offering everything he was and asking only for the chance to love her for the rest of his life. Have you ever loved someone who saved you? Have you ever been protected by someone who would burn the world down for you? Where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of protection, power, and unexpected love, subscribe to our channel for more dark romance tales. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. And if you want exclusive bonus content, extended scenes, and early access, click that join button to become a channel member. Your support helps us create more stories like this. Thank you for being part of our community.